Really what you're doing all of this for at the end is testimonials. That's the name of the game. It's a snowball. A snowball starts with a couple flakes that you put together. Those 5 said yes to your product and your service and your mission and your vision. And if you can wow those 5 people and they refer one person, now you've doubled your membership. If you can't get comfortable in front of 5 people and find your voice, good luck with 1,000, because it's only going to amplify that.
Hey everybody, it's Aaron from Thinkific, and a lot of the times when I talk to course creators, the word community comes up. Actually, when I talk to anyone out there running any kind of online business, community seems to be coming up more and more, and especially since pandemic, a lot of people have been moving online, and a lot of businesses have been having to adapt by starting their own communities or taking their community programs really seriously. So I wanted to invite an expert on this topic to come and talk with us here today, and we've brought you Joanna Novelo from Experience in Magic. Joanna is here to talk community with us, all the different stages, and why community seems to be something that people often get wrong in their business, especially online communities. Joanna has a special course that she is going to be talking about today, and that is to help you train people to help you run your community. You can go to experienceinmagic.com to learn more about that course. But I just wanted to say, hi, Joanna. Thank you so much for being with us here today.
Thank you for having me, Aaron.
Awesome. Yeah, so I wanted to ask, before we get into all of the tips and strategies that you have for our audience here today, I wanted to get into, like, how did you become the go-to community person? Because when I talk to people out there who are running these large courses, big scale courses, and I say, okay, who should I talk to about community? They always say Joanna. So how did you get to that point?
Yeah, so it happened completely on accident, and that's, I think, going to be the theme of the day, is just rolling with the flow and just taking life as it comes. And that's definitely how I ended up in this space. And a couple years ago, I was working at a company where I met this woman named Lindsay Padilla, and Lindsay brought me in as a virtual assistant for her business at the time. And she had asked me one weekend, she was going away on a business trip, and asked me if I could just look over her Facebook group for the weekend while she was away. And this Facebook group was about Facebook ads and funnels, and I didn't know anything about either. And we had some members who were running campaigns and had really urgent questions, but unfortunately I couldn't get a hold of anyone. So in the meantime, I started entertaining people by sending these GIFs or GIFs, however you want to say it. And they found it highly entertaining and totally forgot about their questions, didn't mind that they were running a campaign and needed an answer urgently. And one of them stepped forward and said, hey, I really love what you're doing here, and I'd like for you to come do that in my community. I had no idea what I was doing, but I was like, sure, I'll come do it. And I said, what would you like for me to do? And she said, I really just want you to send gifts to the members in my group. I just think that the way you engage with people is great, and it keeps them coming back, and it's entertaining. And I want that in my group. And then someone from that group asked, and then before I knew it, I had a business. And it sounds crazy that it's that easy, but that is literally how it rolled out for me.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so hold on. So you had people come to you and say, I love what you're doing with GIFs or GIFs. I'm not sure what the audience is going to go. Leave a comment down below on how we should actually say this word, but we're going to be saying probably one way or another the entire video here. But I want to know, like, is that it? Is that all you did? Like, was it that simple?
It was, because I think that at the time when Facebook groups were really they were really making a statement at that time, and people were really starting to get into it and to understand it. It was a place to exchange information and question and answers, but it wasn't a place where people were going to be entertained. Now we have so many Facebook groups, not even just on Facebook. We have them across all these platforms, but on Facebook, we have all of these groups now that just do, I mean, they're crazy, right? For example, there's one group that I'm in where they pretend to be ants. And that's all that they do, is pretend to be ants, and they find that entertaining. And so community has kind of changed over the past couple of years. But when I first started, people didn't really understand them. They just used it as a place for exchanging and not necessarily developing the relationships and all the other things that you can do with it. And I think that it was just something they hadn't seen at the time.
Yeah, that's so interesting. So, like, what time frame was this? This was before pandemic, right?
Definitely. This was about 6 years ago at this point. If
Okay.
I don't calculate well post-COVID, right? Because it all feels the same. But if I'm mathing correctly, it would be about 6 years ago.
Okay, so I love that you kind of got into this and you got recognized for just being able to engage a community, which, like, I didn't mean to simplify that at all. It is actually a bit of a secret talent or a bit of something that you have to tap into to actually get the community going, and it's an integral part of it. But I do think that it's overlooked in community, which is super interesting. And we'll get into that. But I want to know, like, so it sounds like you're in a bunch of communities here. Sorry, you said that you're in a community where people pretend to be ants. Are we talking about the bugs, or are we talking about, the ladies that come over and give you candy and stuff like that?
The bugs. Yes.
The bugs.
Everyone, I'll send you the link after this, and maybe we can link it in the show notes for everyone. But yes, they pretend to be the insect ants. And they will, like, if a crumb falls on the floor, they all come together under this picture of a crumb, and they say push together. And it's the craziest thing. It's the craziest thing. Another one that got really popular during the pandemic was the view from my window, where people just post pictures from outside their window. And it is a fascinating group because you have people from all over the world and you get to see it literally from their window.
Yeah, that is an interesting one. We here at Thinkific, actually, we had a channel. We use Slack for inter-employee communications, and we had a channel in our Slack called Overheard, where you could post in quotes completely anonymous some wild thing that somebody had said in the office, and then we'd all have a laugh about it. But we changed it to Overseen because we were all at home and we were all seeing some stuff out of our window, or like maybe during meetings or something, and we could take a screenshot of that and send that over. So it seems like fun is an integral part to these communities. Obviously, like if you're in any kind of community out there and you see all the memes and all the GIFs or the GIFs, that's an integral part of it. But like, how does this, like, where did you go from there in terms of business? Like, how did you make a business out of this, and where did you go next?
So at the time when I first started, my son was born, and I was at home and really didn't have anything to do but wanted to contribute. And online work was, it was a thing, but definitely not a thing the way it is now, post-COVID especially. But I was looking into working from home. And so this was kind of a hobby. When I had my first 2 or 3 clients, it was just something I could do while the baby was napping and I had some downtime. I started working with another client who, that's kind of where things pivoted, and this turned into an actual business. It was a client who had a very well-known network and very serious business owners that were generating millions and millions per year and had built out businesses, and they wanted me to come in and add community as an extra layer to their business. And I started just signing clients left and right and said, okay, this little hobby is actually a business now, which while you're in the moment, you don't just wake up one day and say, like, this is the day that I decide this is a business. It's very much a back and forth as you see it growing and you're like, is this a business? I don't know. So I kind of went through that. And once I started working with this client, that's definitely where I got really serious, filed an LLC and said, okay, this is it. Community is my thing now. And I'm moving forward with that.
And that's how experienceinmagic.com came about. That's how that started?
Exactly. Yes.
Awesome.
Yes.
And then, so from there, I guess, like, what would you say is like the moral of the story here? It sounds like you kind of like fell into this niche and you realized it, which is interesting. But I want to know that moment of like, when did you know for sure that it was a business? When did you know that you could kind of like replicate the success in a community?
So that happened about 2 years ago when I was managing a group for home service owners. So this client in particular, his business was a garage door business, and he did very well for himself, and he was a natural influencer. So a lot of the people around him were saying, hey, teach me how to do that. And one of his members was located in Oklahoma City. And we set a goal with him that by the end of the year, we were going to get him to $500,000. And he actually ended up hitting $1 million by the end of the year. And I had this realization that all I had was a laptop, and I'm down here in Mexico, but I helped someone in Oklahoma City double their revenue goal. That was just their goal. So we tripled their revenue from the year before. And that's when I realized how powerful community is and how powerful my role in that community was as the connector for all of them. And that's when I knew it doesn't matter what product or service people have, that community is an integral part of it if you really want it to be.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I wanted to dive into this because we've been teasing at it a little bit. Let's get right into it. I want to talk about communities. I want to talk about when you should create a community if you are a business. So like this garage door owner, like, you know, community became a part of it for a very specific reason, and it powered the business. But what I'm wondering is, you know, a lot of people see community and they're wondering about it, or maybe they really want to get started on that. I'm wondering, you know, from your experience, it sounds like some people get into it, but I'm wondering if people, what is like the biggest misunderstanding about communities out there? What do people usually get wrong when they get into it?
Not being willing to start small. And a lot of times people come from a community, or they see somebody else's, or they were a part of it, and they think like, well, I want that. But those people usually had to start small somewhere. And a lot of people want to skip the foundation of the humble beginnings. Mm-hmm. And it's such a critical piece because it's a snowball. A snowball starts with a couple flakes that you put together. And people don't want to start there at the beginning to say, well, only 3 people bought my program. So I'm sure you hear this a lot, right? Like, I only made 5 sales, or I only have so many. But those 5 said yes to your product and your service and your mission and your vision. And if you can wow those 5 people and they refer 1 person, now you've doubled your membership. So starting small and being willing to make those mistakes. I actually don't think that people understand what a blessing a small community is, because no matter what client I'm working with, if we're able to start small and make mistakes, with a smaller group, they're way more forgiving, and they'll give you honest feedback with love, and you know that they're going to be there for you later on. When you get into the thousands, they're not going to be as forgiving, and they will expect you to be a lot more perfected and polished. So the small groups are definitely a blessing for you to find your voice, to polish your systems and your delivery, and then to get really good testimonials.
Yeah, that's a really important point for sure. I talk to a lot of course creators out there, and there's a kind of like a misconception that you have to be a huge business in order to run a community, especially alongside your course. And I'm just wondering, I guess, like, what is your advice for people to get started there, like tactically? Like, what should they do? Should they go to Facebook groups, or should they start a community platform? Should it be Slack or a text group? Like, what is the best way to get started, in your opinion?
Yeah, so let me ask a question there to make sure I understand it. So if they have started a group, where should they start, right? Is that what's their starting point?
Yeah, exactly. So if they're running a business, they have a course, maybe they have another product that they're selling, and they have a few sales already, how would you start layering in community to the offer?
So what I would say is to meet them where they're at, and whatever level of personalization you can give them at that phase, I would give it to them. So if you have a group of maybe 5 people, a Facebook group might actually seem like Goldilocks, like this one is too big. And so you're trying to find the right medium for them. Some people will do a WhatsApp group, And that has a more intimate feel to it. So that way they don't feel pressure to post inside a Facebook group. It's just a quick message that they can send off. So I would look at your platform and those first couple ones, give them the royal treatment and roll out the red carpet for them, because your founding members are worth investing in, because they're going to grow your business for you. So pick a platform that makes all of them comfortable, and also you as the business owner should be comfortable as well. Some people don't like social media apps and they don't want to do that. So pick what's comfortable for you and best for your business and also your community members. And then follow up with them, get your completion rate up there, get your testimonials. All of that stuff is going to help you down the line.
Yeah, for sure. Whenever we're talking to course creators, we overemphasize the whole life cycle of this. And I think that there's a lot of people out there that have, when they're thinking about community, they might think about it in terms of like short-term thinking. Whenever they're thinking about, should I add a community to this? They think like, yeah. If you add a community, I've seen other people do this. It will raise the price of my course, or it will raise the price of my coaching program, and then I can sell it for more. And that's as far as the thinking goes. Do you find that as well with clients? Do a lot of people kind of have short-term thinking about communities?
Well, I think at this point, it's definitely a standard bullet point on a sales page.
Okay.
And I don't know that the people that are putting that out there fully understand exactly what that means. They'll go and they'll open the group and it's there, but there's not really a lot of strategic thinking beyond that, or how am I post-launch is a whole different ballgame. And a lot of times people will put so much emphasis and energy into the launch, and then after that, it just kind of falls where it falls. And that's really where you're just getting started. I mean, if you think about your students that are coming to you, this is their entry point, is the launch. They haven't seen anything else beyond that. And if you haven't prepared anything for them, they're actually on their side from day one, not receiving a great experience.
So what you're saying is, if you're thinking about setting up a community for your course or coaching program or any kind of product out there, you can't just set it up and walk away. You can't just set it up, bring people in, and then just not touch it, right? That seems like common sense, exactly. But a lot of people don't seem to get it, right?
Right. Exactly.
So earlier you said that the community, like a community space for your customers, is now like a standard point on a sales page right now. And why do you think that is the case? Like, what can a community do for your business?
So the reason why I think that is the case is because there's a lot of cookie cutter digital programs out there. And I believe, or I have personally seen, that this is the formula that they're selling to them. And then they're telling them that the community is part of that. And they're just doing it because it's what they were told. And there's not a lot of heart and passion that goes into that. Because if you're truly an expert at what you do, well, let me back up for a second. The number one problem that people actually have with community is content, and they say they don't know what to say to their community. And that's how I know from the beginning that you're not ready for a community, because the people who are experts at what they do will talk your face off 24 hours a day, 7 days a week about whatever they're an expert in. And when people say that they don't know what to say or what conversations to have, that signals to me that you're not ready, or you need to start with a small group, because it's not necessarily that you don't know what you're saying. This comes more into you as the star. And some people get really shy about that, and you have to step into that and embrace that. And that's where the break comes. That's the gap, is you're an expert, but now you need to pivot into being a leader. And some people are still finding their voice in that sense. And that's where I would say to start small, so that way you can get comfortable. Because if you can't get comfortable in front of 5 people and find your voice, good luck with 1,000, because it's only going to amplify that. And that goes back to what I said earlier about it is a blessing to have a smaller group because you can find that voice for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really good advice. I mean, I always tell people to start small with anything that they're doing. Start small, then do it better, and then grow it big, right? Like that's the main stages of that maturity scale, if you will. So I guess like,
Well,
would you agree?
On the flip side of that too,
Yeah.
sorry, on the flip side of that too, Aaron, there are people that have the leadership first and then they don't have the expertise. And these people exist out there, right? Like they're very magnetic. They are natural born leaders. And those people can make the jump because they're not afraid to be in front of people. You can consider community to be a stage, and you're going on stage, and having people question you and push back on you that is a whole nother level. But some people can, they have the star power, but they don't have the knowledge. We know tons of these people, right?
Yeah.
So it's easy for you to see this out in the market and say, well, that person did X, Y, Z, but it's still part of the formula. They're still taking the two pieces to the puzzle. It's just they went to the different piece than you did on your journey.
Yeah, that's right. And there's a lot we can learn from those kinds of people and bring into the community space too. Because I find that with educators specifically, and even coaches to some degree, because it's usually one-on-one or in small groups. When you hit a community stage, it's a bit of a different stage than you would, so to speak, for educating or for coaching. It's more like many to many. You're part of the crowd, right? Would you say is that a big transition that people need to make?
Yes. So if you start with that small group, you are going to be giving more one-on-one time, but that's their reward for getting in early. There will come a pivot where as you get more members, you can no longer offer that, and you should not offer that unless you're going to up the price to match that. But once you go into the one-to-many, where now you're outnumbered, you shouldn't actually get scared, because if you have nurtured that small group of people, they will actually come in and act as reinforcement for you. And then now you have this tribe behind you. And that's where we get into those super fans, those lifelong people that are now invested in your brand, and they're invested in this, and they see you as the leader and they want to help you. They will come in and they will help to support you.
That totally makes sense. So I think one of the things that we've seen here at Thinkific, especially within our own community product, is that when creators are creating their community, typically there's, to borrow from Carrie Melissa Jones, there's the 99 and 1% rule, where it's 90% of the people in your community, in larger communities, typically don't really, contribute. They lurk, they watch, they consume. There's a 9% that really contribute, that are involved in discussions. And then there's that 1%, there's like a core to every community that are the leaders. They do your job for you, essentially. They grow it for you, they engage for you. Do you think that's true for any community?
I would definitely say that that's true, because there are usually people that you're seen as, let's say, like the guru, but you're seen as this expert, and people look up to you, and that's part of being a leader. And so this is definitely a symptom of being a leader, that you have people that are looking up to you and that want to naturally be around you and to help you. And I've come across this too, like when I manage communities, that there are some people that are in there who actually do more work than me, but it's their passion that gets them there. I'm there because I want to get paid by a client, but these people they're heavily invested in it. They're invested in the industry, in this community, in networking with other people, and they're always going to be there. And if you have done your job correctly, by the time your group starts growing, these people are already in place.
So what you're talking about here are kind of like to put it another way, I've had conversations with some people who treat their community like a tribe, quote unquote, and then they have their elders and their new people, and the elders are kind of like the people who are facilitating that conversation. Like you said, they're doing more work than you're doing even in the community. I'm just wondering, like, let's back up a little bit and let's talk about, like, what do you actually have to do to get people started in a community, especially when it relates to an online course or a coaching program? What is the overall vision here that you usually go for? Do you need to kind of like map it out, or is there like an analogy that you can go with there?
Well, I would start with whatever your promised outcome is going to be, and then I would reverse engineer back from that and figure out how you're going to get them to that point. So most people are selling a course to get you from point A to B, or A to B, C, however many steps you have in there, but you're moving them from one point to another. So this is a journey, and how they get there is dependent upon you. And if they enjoy the journey, that determines whether or not they're going to be a repeat customer for you. So this part of the process of making sure that they can, number one, consume your content, that is the biggest piece that you're looking for here. Because if they are not going through your lessons and consuming the knowledge, they are not taking the journey. So your main point is to figure out, how do I get them from A to B? From there, you need to answer the question, how do I make that fun? So the concept of a spoonful of sugar is where this really comes in. Like, how can you actually make this fun? Because learning something new is not always fun. In fact, it's usually not fun because you have to either unlearn something or learn something or change something. There is a change being made, and change is not easy. So approach it with that people are going to have ups and downs on this journey. And I have an energy map that I mapped out, because if you think about the process of, let's say, high school, because most people have gone to high school, right? And so, you start out and you're like a nobody, and you have this like whole journey to go through. You're an underclassman. And then at the end of that journey, you're graduating and you're ready for the real world. So there are highs and lows in there, and you look back on it like they're on these memories, and some are good and some are bad. So your students are going to go through the exact same thing on this journey, highs and lows from A to B. So that's your framework to work with them. So how you decide to make it fun, that's up to you. And that's where you really want to know your audience and what makes them, what motivates them, what moves them. So that way you can get them going on their journey. I think as course creators, you know that your material is good, and it will hurt your feelings if people are not going through and consuming this course, right? And sometimes you just sit on the sidelines and say, well, they paid. I mean, that's all I can really ask for. And it's really not. You have so many different learning styles. You have so many people that are going through personal issues at one point or another during this journey, and everybody is on a different page. And you, as the expert, need to tap into your community to call in for assistance on this. So when you're thinking about, how do I make it fun, not all of this has to be put on your shoulders. You have other members that are going to show up and actually bring perspectives that are relevant that you may not have even thought of. So designing this journey for them is critical. And I understand that people get really tired after they're launching, but the biggest thing that I see is that there's no plan in place. This journey is not laid out. So statistically, most students don't make it past module 1, lesson 2, lesson 3. They get stuck because you have to really put that carrot in front of them. This is not an easy thing for them to go through, even though it seems easy for you as the expert. The creativity is limitless here on what you can do, but People are visual, so checklists really help. An onboarding checklist to make sure that you get in. Here's your calls. Here's the link to our calendar. Here's the link to the group. All of that, making it super easy. And then for the next lesson or whatever module, another checklist. If you need that to help them stay organized. Other things you can do are challenges. So I have one client who her group was open for 1 year, but she only showed up for 120 days out of that entire year. So she had a time motivation for her students. When she launched, we have 60 days that I will be in here distraction free and I will help you on this journey. You need to get through these modules. And she laid out when she wanted you to have the modules done. And your motivation was that if I don't finish within 60 days, I'm not going to have access to her anymore. Her motivation on the other side was if I can get them consuming content, my refund rate decreases dramatically. So not only the journey for them to complete, but for you as a business owner, that's so important on the other side, because getting them consuming, they're not going to ask for the refunds. You're not going to have complaints as often, and you're going to start getting results, because really what you're doing all of this for at the end is testimonials. That's the name of the game. And community is an integral part of that, but also your performance as a business owner shows up in testimonials, because if you can't get them to point B, you don't get a testimonial.
Yeah, 100%. That's a beautiful overview of like how community comes into play when you're into this, when you're in the course itself. Like you said, I really like the high school analogy. Actually, I really like it. You know, even though high school isn't the greatest for everybody, and some people aren't able to go, but like the idea there of coming in to learn. You know, when you think back to high school, you think about the time you spent learning, and then you think about the time you spent in between learning, where you are basically decompressing or basically putting that into action with friends or something along those lines. And I feel like that's where community kind of fits in. There's these like cracks in between all of the formal learning, where community shows up and helps bring people through those challenges or through, you know, maybe failures, and bring them back to the course. So I'm really excited to hear that. I love that analogy. It makes total sense. Now you mentioned testimonials, you mentioned refund rates here too. So I guess how would you recommend people go about doing that? How would you recommend people go about getting these like glowing testimonials? Is community a secret here, or is it something else?
So I would say community is what's going to drive that home for you. So you will have some students that don't participate in your community at all. They're really there for you and your knowledge. They're going to consume that and they're going to get the results. It's a smaller number, but there is this group that exists. So for the rest of them, they're all coming with their own unique obstacles, their own schedules, their own family commitments. Some of them have multiple businesses. It's all over the board. So what I would do is I would tell them what you want from them, which is exactly what my client did before. She said, I will give you 60 days and I want you to show up for me. So that's huge. And you being able to say how you want them to show up, because sometimes that's really all they need. They just need some direction and some instructions and a little bit of motivation, and then they're there. Then I would say for every community, no matter what, you're always going to have people that are dealing with personal issues. Family members are going to pass away. Especially with COVID, there was just so much outside of COVID that came out of COVID. Job loss, depression. There's so many other things, and those will always be present in your community. So you have to be able to navigate that when it comes and say, okay, we're still on this journey of A to B if you're committed to it, and I'm going to work with you to get through that. The community members will also help you through that. They'll send gifts and they'll check up on them in Messenger, and that makes them feel good, because this actually becomes something bigger than you. And if you try to stop that, you're only harming yourself, because the community becomes this force that is really a beautiful thing to see. So consider all of those factors when you're designing your journey. And then I think as an expert, you know where people are going to trip and fall. And you know the hard points, and you know what's easier. So break that up and make it a little bit more manageable. Big bite, small bite, big bite, small bite. And that will help them. So that way it's not this constant onslaught of, I have to learn this new thing and I'm not grasping it and I'm failing. Because they go through what is called the cycle of change. So when you're going through that, you are failing and then you're succeeding. But then once you master that, you go on to fail and then succeed. So you're going through this constant loop of failing and succeeding. So here's an example of that. My client that did publicity, they would learn how to write pitches. So great, I learned that skill of writing a pitch. And then what happens? I submit it and get a no. Okay, they're probably going to feel down because they just spent 2 months with my coach writing out this pitch and whatever. And then now we have to navigate learning how to get a rejection. And some people will say, well, I'm okay. I don't really like rejection. I'm walking away from that. So that's a point where you would say to yourself, what do I need to do to make sure that they don't feel deflated? Because a no is hard, no matter who you are, especially when you put a lot of effort behind it. So you can either go the opposite. So celebrate a no. Like go into the group. If you get a no, put it in there so we can celebrate it. Because you're sitting there thinking we got a no, but on our side, we're thinking, but you just put another pitch on the scoreboard for us. And statistically, that means we're going somewhere. And then the community will help you reframe it. But you need to know your material in and out, and where are they going to get stuck? How can I get you unstuck? And then the points where it's easy, how do you actually emphasize those points? Because if you learn something small and you get excited about it, I want to pump you up and get you excited. That's really easy energy to work off of. And then I would say the beauty of community is bringing all of those different perspectives together and letting them interpret your, and so we'll color inside the lines on this one, because I don't want to take away from I don't want people to get confused about you being the expert and you having the knowledge, but sometimes people digest it differently and they understand it differently, and they can help others who are on the same wavelength. So they see your material through their lens and their experiences. And so they interpret it slightly different, and they can apply it into their lives slightly different. And having all of these people that can come together and have these different perspectives allows everyone to see your material in a new light and to understand it in a new way.
Yeah, so super comprehensive. I think like the big takeaway for me there is that, you know, if you're not a community leader, if you're not somebody, if you get anxious about the idea of running a community, it kind of sounds like there are elements to the community that just to kind of like take care of themselves. And there are benefits to having that happen, such as like you just said, there are people out there that are on different wavelengths that will take the opportunity, if you create that space, to explain their learning through their wavelength, through their filter, how they see the world. And that's going to help somebody who's on that same wavelength. So I guess like what you're saying here, let me know if this is true or not, but you kind of have to like let go at some point. You have to build in a little bit of lack of control into your community, right? Is that something that you would have to do to run a great community?
Well, I don't think you have to do it. You'll do fine if you don't, but you can unlock the next level if you do.
Okay.
And if you just step back and let, you know, I think if you think about artists, they put that art out there, but they let other people interpret it however they want, and they don't say whether you're wrong or you're right. I am cognizant of the fact that some of this stuff is like, it has to be black and white, but this is your art and you're putting it out there and you're being critiqued sometimes, right? And then but it's for them to apply for themselves. That was a terrible answer. That was terrible.
No, it was good. I think I like where you're going with that. I think like another big takeaway that I learned from you is that, if you're not a community leader, or if you're thinking like, how am I going to do this? How am I going to design a whole journey or an energy map, like you said, of the ups and the downs and the cycles of changes in my community, in my course that are going to happen from the learning. You kind of have to like know it, right? You kind of have to understand it. And it's a great place to start from, is just what are if after this lesson they're going to go do something, what could possibly happen there that would create an up in an energy spike, or maybe like an energy valley in a way, right? Is that true? You kind of have to start from there. Is that the best place to start from?
You do. And so when you design your course, you've already laid the journey out. So the community is just going to go on, it's literally just going to go on top of it. So you're not necessarily reinventing the wheel here. You're not designing something completely different, because you've already put the point A, point B out. So by putting the lessons there, start at the top. What would I need to do to get them to complete these lessons? How can I gamify that? You earn X amount of points if you complete each lesson. And then after you do a module, you get bonus points. And then they can cash those points in for something. A one-on-one call with you, or one of your team members, or whatever you want it to be. But you've already done the legwork. It's just the spoonful of sugar. How do you make it fun for them? And how do you get them to complete it? And I think that still goes back to knowing your audience. What motivates them? And you have to constantly remind them, remember you signed up for this because you wanted this. There was something you promised them. And you have to keep reminding them that the solution that they're working towards is there. And we're getting there. We're getting there.
How would you recommend doing that? I guess, what's the best way to motivate people with that kind of message? Or how do you craft that kind of message in your community space?
I would definitely do an energy map and figure out what are the highs, what are the lows, how do you make the highs higher, and how do you bring the lows up? So for the people that are doing the media pitches, when they get a no, which will be their first, let's say, failure in your community, I would ask myself, okay, what could I do to soften that blow? So that way they're not discouraged from continuing. And then that's what I would put in place. And then you go on and you say, okay, what's the next? And then what's the next? And then you want to make it you just want to make it fun, because people don't want to show up for things that are boring and that just is very dry. And you want to figure out how you can make it fun. How can you gamify it? How can you get them involved on a daily basis? Because really the daily basis is key. Like if you can get into their routine and their daily lives, you've won there. But it has to be fun and it has to be meaningful.
Great. So I think what we'll do to kind of cap off the interview here is we're going to get into some hot seat questions. Is that okay with you?
Sure.
Fantastic. Yeah. So we'll start with an easier one. Do you say Jif or GIF?
I say GIF. I read an article a while ago that the creator says Jif, and he doesn't like when people call it GIFs, but it's a G, and I think it should be pronounced GIF. Okay,
fair enough. We only have so much to talk about now, but we'll start saying GIF. That makes sense to me. I think the next question that I would love to ask you is, this is not coming from a place of laziness. it's coming from a place of, I'm a busy entrepreneur. I'm impersonating someone right now. I'm a busy entrepreneur. I don't have time for community, but I want it. I know that it creates value for my company, for my business. I know that it creates value for my customers. How do I do community in the least effortful way possible? Is that possible?
It is. So you're going to go back and you're going to design that journey. So that way you don't have to think about that moving forward, and especially post-launch. It already needs to be laid out. So design your journey. You already know, take your first lesson in your first module and your last lesson in your last module. That's your point A and your point B. Where are they going to fall? How can I celebrate them when they're up? And then your core members, it's always going to come back to them. Don't skip that step. It's so important to have them because they're going to come in and they're going to help you. I will also say that a lot of times people try to treat the community like a social media channel. And that's where the pressure of creating content all the time comes in. And you've already created the content. They don't need to consume more content, because if you can't get them to consume, your focus should be on them consuming the content inside your course, not consuming the content inside the Facebook group. So oftentimes you're creating double the work, and it's not necessary, because most likely they're following you on Instagram and LinkedIn and Facebook or some other channel, and they're getting that content there as well. There's no pressure to have to create more content. If you're creating content inside of your group, it is content that asks them additional questions about something in your course, or it's driving them back to the course. But they already have one job of consuming the content, and then they have a second job of implementing the content. Your community is the place that helps those things flow and move. And it's there for support and ideation and brainstorming. And it's not a place where you have to go out and sell and deliver a message or anything, or always have something ready for them. It really can be easy. And the more that you pour into your people, the less content that you have to create in your community, because they're going to create content on their own. That's the difference between social media and community. Your community can create that content for you. They can create their own posts. They can ask their own questions. They can tell their own stories. You actually don't have to do anything. I would say if you're spending more than 2 hours engaging inside the group, if you're busy, that's more than enough. And I wouldn't recommend more than 2 hours, especially if you have a VA that could come in and handle the admin tasks for you.
Is that 2 hours? Is that 2 hours every day, or is that 2 hours every week? What's the time frame there?
That's 2 hours per week. And that means responding to posts or creating posts or anything with your name on it inside of that group. More than 2 hours, in my book, is too much. Because if you think about it, you create a piece of content, they have to consume a piece of content, while at the same time they're still stuck on module 1, lesson 2. All you're going to do is slow them down.
That totally makes sense.
So you're not in the content creation business anymore. You've done that. So your focus is, how do I move them through this? And then there's beauty in that journey. And that's where you want to have conversations about that. People are going to change. They bought a program to change. They literally said, I want a change in my life, and I want you to be the one that leads me there. And your focus is on transformation and getting them through that course. Everything else is just a distraction. And a lot of people will, I don't know if that's because people make that assumption or it's put on people as expectations, but it should not be super time consuming. Also, energetically for you, it should not consume you. You should not have this feeling of, you should be able to get a burst of excitement from it, because people are doing, they're getting the results that you said that they were going to get. That should be a high for anybody that is in the course creation business, because that is your testimonial. That's your lead into your testimonial, is getting them there. And that should be exciting for you. If it feels like it's heavy, I would reassess and figure out what's happening. I had one person who was doing blogs once a day inside of his community. Nobody was reading it. And it was so time consuming for him. And I'm like, so then you should stop doing it. But I can't. Well, who said that? You just told me you didn't like doing it. They don't like reading it. We should just stop. So take an honest assessment of what your time commitments are inside of that group. And an hour a week, especially if you have a VA, an hour a week should be enough for you to pop in and show your face, read through some comments, talk to people. That should be more than enough. Plus maybe circulating in like a live Q&A or something, like 1 hour. So that's where those 2 hours come from. I would say 1 hour if you want to do a training or anything like that, and then another hour engaging. So that comes out to like 10 to 15 minutes a day, if that.
Okay.
And you don't have to go in every day, by the way. You can do whatever you want. As long as you set the expectations for your members, you can do whatever you want. Hey, I'll be in here on Mondays.
Yeah, that definitely sounds like a manageable amount of time for sure. And you mentioned a couple of times using a VA. So I'm wondering, what do you do to hire a VA? How do you hire somebody to help you with this? And when is a good time to do it? And then how do you do it?
So if you have a community, I make the assumption a lot of times that people have a VA. I haven't really come across a lot of people that don't have a VA when they have their community, because that's usually your first hire. So they can help you with your admin tasks, like approving people into the group. If people have questions about logins or billing information, they can help you with that. You really want to focus on the expert part, which is what the VA can't help you with, the technical questions where it goes into your expertise. So anything outside of that, I would delegate out to a VA. Going in the group every day, making sure that everybody got a response, or checking comments to make sure people aren't bullying other people. That stuff can be outsourced pretty easily for you. And then that keeps you in your zone of genius.
And then where do you go to hire one? What's your advice there? Who do you pick?
So you can do agencies. There are Facebook groups where you can go and you can put up a post for those, and or Upwork. They're pretty easy to find. Most of the time I would go through referrals. So I would ask my friends, hey, do you know of a VA? And somebody will usually pop up with a recommendation. Mm-hmm. So they're pretty easy to find. I think on the other hand, you have community managers who are playing sometimes the role of a VA, but you also need sort of this host where if it's a smaller group, you could get away with a VA just coming in and making sure everybody's okay and that nothing is on fire. But for bigger groups where you have a lot more personalities and you have a lot more going on inside the group, you're going to find yourself pulled back in more because the VA is not equipped to handle the intricacies of community. And then that's where I would consider having a community manager. And your VA, actually, I've trained a lot of VAs to have this extra layer of skill of community management, because it's really about this hosting. And VAs are a lot more task oriented. Here's your list, have it done by this day. Whereas a community manager is more like, I think you might be getting stuck there. Let me ask a question that might open something else up. They're a lot more intuitive with your members, and they help to move them along the journey. So the more your community grows, that separation of task and your expertise is going to start blending, and it's going to get more confusing of like, do I handle that or do you? And a community manager is a perfect person to come in and help you with that. And I also think that for hiring a community manager, a lot of times it's easier to just pick them out of your community because they might be acclimated with the other members already. They might have taken your course and they're very familiar with everything. And then you don't have to do this larger onboarding process. And then they can actually cover that expertise gap a little more. And they can help you out on the VA side. And that still allows you to be removed. And again, you're like the doctor, like you only want to be paged in when your skills are really needed.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And then you're able to help with this, right? So from what I understand, you have a course on community management for community managers, right? So somebody is out there and wondering, maybe I should hire somebody, or maybe they have somebody. Is that a good time for them to come knocking on your door?
Exactly. So if you have a VA that you actually want to take that extra layer of community for you, I have a program that will certify them for that. And we walk through the journey, the complete journey of your community. We'll start at the top with the vision. You'll do a vision transfer with your community manager. And then it goes all the way down to the very end where we're measuring KPIs every month and we're building culture. With community, really, once you start building a culture and there's like a language that's developed between all the members and there's this camaraderie and they have names for each other, that's when your community has really got a life of its own. So for sure, if you have a culture built in your community and you don't have a community manager yet, that's definitely overdue for you. But if you have someone on your team that you trust and you're already working well with them, then this would be an extra skill set for them to help you.
Awesome. And they, if anyone's interested in that, they can go to experienceinmagic.com, right? Is that how they find out about that?
Correct. Yes.
Awesome. Well, it's been wonderful chatting with you, Joanna. I always learn something new from you about communities. Communities are going to be huge for Thinkific too, so keep your ear out for news about that. Thank you so much for being with us, Joanna, today.
Thank you, Aaron, and thank you, Thinkific, for having me.
Absolutely. Anytime. So if you want to learn more about Joanna Novelo, go to experienceinmagic.com, especially if you have a community manager or a VA that needs some help getting into your community and working for you the best way possible to help you grow your community. Joanna is your person there for sure. So jump over there and say hi to Joanna. Thanks for watching. If you liked what you saw here today, make sure to subscribe and comment down below. Let us know what your questions are about community, any kind of future topics that you would like to watch from us here at Thinkific. And make sure to hit like and share this with a friend if you think that they could use some help with their community, or perhaps if they're thinking about starting one. As always, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. And we'll see you next time.